Well, I really appreciate the opportunity here to speak to you today. I usually have to try to explain what these guys talk about, so this is a great day for me. I usually have to talk about all that so my story makes sense. If you were to listen to my story and not know what's behind the science behind this problem, you'd say, "What? That guy must be." He didn't really know his kid like he should have. He must have really been a bad parent. Boy, there must have been something going on in that family. Boy, that wouldn't happen to my kids. That wouldn't happen in my family, because I'd tell you what I'd do about it. So it's very important to listen to the science, and you'll understand what goes on. And today I'm just going to tell you my story, what happened. So it's a real life story. I'll bring a little reality into the room today. And in that little urn, those are my son's ashes. Now that's the reality of where this all ends. I like to take him with me when I go speak. Gives me a little energy, gives me a little emotion. And he may not be able to today to tell you the story, but he'd love to if he could. He hated this drug. He hated addiction. He hated what it made him become. So a little bit about my family and the dynamics in my family are this. I've been married 30-some years. I have five kids, 4 daughters and 1 son. Andy's not here with us, but his spirit certainly is. And I always like to say, when somebody says, I'm sorry you lost your son, I always say, I didn't lose anything. I still have my son. He may have got to heaven a little bit ahead of me, but I didn't lose him. Because everything he attained through life is the points he scored in basketball games, the points he scored in football games. They're all still there. My daughters, 3 of them are, honor students at Michigan State University, graduated from there. The 4th one graduated from Western University with a perfect 4-point average. Went through college without missing a question on a quiz, test, or final exam. She now runs my company. She's president of it and major stockholder. Dad's just another employee now. I kind of like that part. So we got a pretty good family. My wife, she worked part-time when kids were little. She didn't work at all. She wanted to be home with the kids. We probably went to I could probably count on one hand the number of sporting events we missed with our kids. We were constantly supporting them in their school events and their athletic events. Andy played football, ran track, played basketball. He even said to me one time when he was probably, I'm going to guess, 7th, 8th grade, we were getting down to watch the Super Bowl, and he says, hey, did you know such and such can't play today? I said, no, what happened? He says, the guy was using drugs. I said, you're kidding me. He says, no. He says, Dad, why do people use drugs? He said, why would a guy that's got all this going for him, he's going to be starting in the Super Bowl, why would he use drugs the night before? I said, I have no idea. He looked at me and he said, Dad, I'll never use drugs. Well, lo and behold, within 10 years, he was dead from a drug overdose. Now, how'd that possibly happen? Andy didn't want to go to college. He says, I just didn't come to work for you, Dad. I said, that's okay. I've never been to college myself, I'm kind of a self-made person. I'm self-motivated, self-educated. I always believe the information's out there. If you really want it, go get it. And, he decided to come to work for me. So we made him an apprentice electrician when he was 18, right out of high school. He worked pretty good for a year, getting along great with the other employees. Towards the end of that first year, I noticed a little bit of slide in his attitude. Now, here's a young kid that never got in a day's worth of trouble. Not one phone call from the school. Matter of fact, even had a teacher that named one of her children after him when her child was born. She said, "Man, I want this kid to grow up like your son." But I noticed an attitude change. His work tapered off. Little mood changes going on. But, I didn't think much about it, First off, heroin addiction was the last thing, it wasn't even on my radar. And number 2 is, here's a kid that's 19 going on 20 years old. A lot of changes take place in that time in someone's life. Think about yourself back then. That's when you're right in between being an adult. They call you an adult, but you're not really an adult. Brain doesn't mature till you're at least 25 years old. So, he moved in with some kids from our rural area that we lived in, small community, Grass Lake. That didn't work out. All of a sudden he says, Dad, I'd like to move back home if I could. I said, well, sure, absolutely. You can have the whole basement. Take it right over. Fix it up. Do whatever you want to it. He said, okay, great. Then he started getting sick a lot. I said, wow, what's wrong with you today? And he was physically sick. It wasn't like, hey, I got a little cough. I can't come into work today. I mean, he's physically sick. He said, got the flu again, Dad. Got the flu again. I said, boy, somebody got the flu as much as you did. I think you need to see a doctor. He said, no, I don't need a doctor. He said, I'll get over all this stuff. And, he continually progressed in a downward spiral. Became aggressive, became angry, became moody, some things that he never was. Never. So one day in the driveway, he got a little aggressive with me. And I looked him in the eye and I says, you got a problem you want to talk to me about? He said, Dad, I don't have no problem. I can't believe you'd ask me that question. I said, well, you know what I'm asking? I'm asking about a drug problem. He said, I can't even believe you'd say that to me. You know my stance on those. So he spun out of the driveway as fast as he could in his little sports car. Now here's a kid that also had accumulated $10,000 of cash in the bank. He bought his own car. He had the big screen TVs. He had everything. I didn't give him any money. He earned his way through life. Same with my daughters. They paid for their own college. I thought that was very important. And he come back down the driveway 5 minutes later. He says, Dad, I do have a problem. I said, well, what's the problem? He said, Dad, I'm hooked on prescription drugs. Not knowing anything about the whole subject. I'd heard a little bit about heroin at the time. This is 2008. I'd heard a little bit about heroin at the time. And I said, oh, my God. I said, I was worried you were going to tell me that you were using that heroin people are talking to me about. Little did I know, till he told me later on, he had already went from Oxycontin to heroin. But he said, and this is something that, this all relates back to the stigma that's holding progress back. He said, Dad, when I told you prescription drugs, didn't that sound a lot better than saying I was on heroin? Mm-hmm. I said, yeah, absolutely. I said, and I've talked to so many young kids after that, and they all tell me the same thing. They'll look me in the eye still and go, yeah, I'm just using prescription drugs. I said, no, you're not using heroin. They said, how you know? I said, everybody tells me that. Had he told me at the time, had I been more educated at the time and known that Oxycontin, there's only one tiny molecular difference between Oxycontin and heroin, had I known they were basically the same thing as far as the brain's concerned, yeah, I might have took a little more action. But I said, oh, it's just prescription drugs. We'll get over that. They got great places to send somebody to. No big deal. Got him into a rehab facility, Brighton Recovery, the very next day. He was there 2 weeks. Everybody told me what a great place it is. He gets out after 2 weeks. He comes back. He looks good. He talks good. I said, oh boy, we got rid of that problem. Well, little did I know, most of the people that go through a 2-week rehabilitation facility end up are using pretty much the day they get out. 80% of them are using in the first 2 weeks. This has a lot to do with the science behind the drug. It has a lot to do with their memory reward system. It has. I just want you to know, as parents, if you send somebody and they've been detoxed and they go to a 2-week stay somewhere and you think, well, that should cure them, that's not even close. That's just the very first step in this whole journey. So anyway, he got back out. He's back at work. He seems to be all right. Of course he was all right. He was chipping away. He was using just enough to get him out of bed in the morning, to get to work, to function. So a little bit of time went on, 2 or 3 months, and all of a sudden we get a call that he's unresponsive and unconscious. You don't ever want that phone call. I got that phone call 3 times, as a matter of fact. It revived him, sent him back to rehab facility, sent him back to rehab 3 different times. Each time for a little longer, each time with the same results. Then he got caught on a simple possession charge. He was actually working for JNet at the time. He was under no obligation to work for him. He hated the drug so bad. He hated the dealers. He hated everything about it. Hated himself. But he was under no obligation. He had not committed any crimes up to this point. But he said, man, I think I could get some of these guys. I'd like to get these guys off the street. And so anyway, he bought from a house that he knew was under surveillance. And I said, Andy, you knew the house was under surveillance. How could you possibly walk in there and make a buy? He said, Dad, you don't understand. You don't understand the drive behind this drug. And he was right. I didn't understand. I understand now. I've seen it all by now. So anyway, he went to jail. I got him out right away. Boy, I don't want my son in jail. What a horrible place to be. You get him out, get a good lawyer. We'll get him out of there within days, which I did. Another big mistake. Got him back in a rehab facility, same results. Another overdose, another near-death experience. Finally, after violating probation, the judge put him in jail for 90 days. Now, you'd think that a kid who was never got in trouble a day in his life, a little young kid from a real rural community, never been in the big city, goes to jail, boy, that surely will cure him of this. No question about it, in my mind. In his mind, too. Not even close. After that 90-day stay in jail, he came out because he talked good, he looked good, he felt good. He thought he was cured of this. He said, matter of fact, I picked him up at the jail, and he says, Dad, you know what? He said, I'm never going back to that stuff. I would never touch that in a million years. That just about destroyed my life. And by this time, that $10,000 he had in the bank that he had earned was gone. That sports car that he bought with his own money was gone. Every single possession in life that he had either pawned or sold in return for cash to buy drugs. And you got to remember, this is the kid who saved every card he ever had that had $2 in it. Here's a kid that made sure every sock in his drawer was perfectly in order, made sure his room was clean. In a matter of a few short years, he was broke, he was unkept, and he didn't care about anything. So after this last jail term, he gets out. He said, I'd like to come back to work, Dad, right away. I said, no, I can't afford that in the company. Something happens, that's a big liability. I said, you got to earn your way back, though. You certainly can. I'm a true believer. Redemption's 100% possible. And about 3 weeks went by. He's doing all the right things. Boy, he's going to the meetings every day, twice a day. He's doing everything he can to get himself back together, back in the game of life. And so I brought him back to work. About 2 weeks went by, and he worked very well. People on the crew said, boy, I don't know what got into him, but man, he's really working. He's doing the job. So I saw him one day about noon, and I said, hey, Andy, how's it going today? He said, not good, Dad. I said, what's the matter? He said, just depressed, man. I said, I'm so depressed today. I said, well, what are you depressed about? He said, I don't know. I said, well, I'll tell you what. It's noon. It's going to be 12:30 shortly. I'll come back at 3:30. When you get out, we'll go do something fun. He said, Dad, nothing's going to be fun today. I said, no, I'll tell you what. I said, we'll drive to Metro. We'll get on an airplane. We won't even tell Mom. We'll just call her from wherever we decide to go. He said, whatever, Dad. He said, you don't understand. Life is not fun right now. So about 2:40 that afternoon, I did get a phone call. He said, you need to get over to the job site right away. So I headed over there. I said, is it Andy? They said, yep, you need to hurry. So I get there, and, there's nothing like seeing your kid on the ground while the paramedics are trying to pump air in their lungs, trying to make their heart beat. I don't wish that on anybody. And by God, I'll do anything to keep that from happening to anybody. So I sat there and watched there, good 20, 30 minutes. And, of course, I was devastated. What had happened was, he'd got a phone call from a particular drug dealer the day before, left several messages on his phone. Said, hey, I heard you're out of jail. I heard, I got the stuff for you. You want some? All these messages were unanswered. Well, that's what he was depressed about. He knew that there was no way, that's all he could think about, and there was no way he was not going to be able to make that buy that day. It'd be no different than you or I going for 3-4 days without a glass of water, an odorless, tasteless substance, and having somebody offer you that water for $100, and you would go get the $100, I guarantee you. So anyway, they brought the drugs right to the site. The only thing he had left in the world was his PlayStation that he got for Christmas that year. You know, still in the box, never been opened. Handed it to the dealer. The dealer handed him the dope. Happened to be we had a construction site camera on site, so we caught the whole thing on tape. Walked into the outhouse, you know, died with a needle still in his arm. It certainly shook our foundations, or our family's foundation, right to the core. But we grieved for 3 days, and we came back swinging. I gave the eulogy at his funeral, and I invited everybody I knew that was using. You know, I'd call them up. They say, "We didn't think you'd want us there, Mike." I said, "No, I want you there. We're going to talk about this subject. You know, we're going to talk. I'm not going to lecture you. I'm not going to yell at you, but we're going to talk about this subject, and we're going to do something in this little community of Grass Lake." And that's exactly what we did. And that's something everybody can do, you know. Sometimes you think of yourself as, geez, who am I? What could I do? You know, there's so many things you can do. You know, talk to your neighbors. I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to affect everybody in the country. Everybody in their family is going to have somebody in their family who's going to be a cousin, brother, you know, their favorite nephew. Everybody. That's the extent of this thing. You know, in our little community of Grass Lake, as I said, there was 30 kids using heroin within an 8-mile radius of my house back in 2008. You know, these are young kids that I knew were great kids. These were little kids that I knew, I had known. I'd coached Little League baseball, T-ball. I'd watched these kids grow up. I knew them personally. I gave them rides to practice. They were great kids. Many of them are dead now. And many of them are struggling for the rest of their life, living on government assistance, unable to keep a job, in and out of rehab facilities. You know, just to change the mood a little bit, when I'm talking to somebody now, the first thing I say to them when I sit down with them after a few minutes, and they tell me a little bit about their story, and I'll listen to it, and I'll look at them right in the eye, and I'll say, "I'll tell you what, when I'm done with you, I'll make a taxpayer out of you." They'll look at you a little strange. They'll go, "Well, what does that mean?" So anyway, you know, there's something everybody can do. You need to get involved. You need to get educated. I talk to kids in schools all the time. You know, I try to teach them the science. I'm a big fan of teaching kids how to think, not what to think. You know, we're not going to run around and say, "I don't want you to use drugs." Now, I'm going to tell you how drugs work on the brain, what it's really doing. The fact that nobody's tough enough to get around this. There's nobody that's immune to opiates and how they work on the brain. And we can have the greatest president in the world, we can have the greatest governor, we can have the greatest set of legislators, we can have the greatest law enforcement, we can have the greatest mayor, we can have all those things. That's not going to solve this problem. The public needs to get engaged. We need to get rid of the stigma. We need to quit looking at these young kids like they're a rotten kid from the wrong side of town with a bad set of parents. That is a total fallacy. This crosses all lines. This is not a black problem. This is not a white problem. This is not a Muslim problem, not a Hispanic problem. This is an American problem. And that's the way we need to attack this. And I certainly encourage everyone here to get involved, learn what's going on, understand what's going on, and by God, do not be afraid to come out and talk about it. I'm going to leave you with a little story here. Old story, I like to tell it a lot. A lot of people have heard it, I'm sure. Probably everybody's heard it once. But I think it's really good that you listen to it again, because it's a really short 2-minute story with a powerful message. And it goes especially towards those health workers that I see out there that work with us all the time, and they see the failure rate is unbelievable. You know, and I'm sure at the end of the day they go, "Man, I'm not sure what I'm doing this for every day. I see failure, 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 failure. I see the foster care system being overburdened. I see mothers not taking care of their children. You know, this is all, I can't hardly take this stuff." Well, you need to listen to this story again. And for those of you who don't think you can do anything about the problem because, hey, you know, it's not affecting me, not affecting my family, and what can I do? I'm just a regular citizen. Well, you're a citizen of the United States of America, you know, a citizen of a government that's of the people. So the old man was standing down by the water one day, bending over, throwing some stuff in the water. Young kid comes walking down through there and he says, hey, old man, what are you doing? The old man says, sun's up, tide's out. Starfish are stuck on the beach here. Throwing them back in the water, they'll surely die. The young kid says, wow, a lot of starfish on this beach. He says, matter of fact, old man, he says, I looked down this beach as far as I could see. That's all I can see are these starfish. He said, you could do this all day, old man. You'd never make a difference here. You couldn't possibly make a difference. The old man reaches down, picks another one up, pitches in the water. He says, I bet I made a difference to that one now, didn't it? Now, certainly, the moral of that story is that this, yes, there is a lot of failure. But what about that one person? What about that one person you saved from death? And I always like to take that story a little farther. I always like to take that story, and this is directed at the general public. Hey, what if everybody on that beach that day got up off their towel, took a few minutes out of their leisure time, walked down to the edge of that water, and all picked up a starfish and threw it back in the water, saved its life? You know, well, we start doing that as a community, as a people, you know, we'll not only make a difference, but we change the course of this nation. Thank you so much.